Mouth explosion.
Fart noise.
There. Awesome. Hey, welcome back.
Yes, we are back with Mike Hawthorne.
Hello.
So
Thanks for
that's
sticking around.
So you guys were asking about my Ponzi scheme on how to get rich.
Yes.
So here's what you do.
Yeah.
You got to get your grandparents to invest into this thing. Send me a bunch of money. I'm just kidding. There's no Ponzi scheme. Sorry.
Honestly, I was waiting to see where this is going.
I was like,
I had my
What-
notepad. Come on.
what you got to do is you got to get your grandparents to fund your comic book, and then what you do is you sell to a publisher. No.
Yeah. Anyway.
And then you move to Thailand.
No, you simply tell them this is how it works.
Yeah.
So, quick question about, you talked about your roots basically starting out as an indie artist.
Right.
And it's just interesting that I just kind of didn't expect that, but it seems like the impression would be that people that work in mainstream books tend to have aimed for that their whole career. They're hitting the shows with their portfolios, getting reviews,
Right,
and just gearing towards like the big three or what have you.
Right.
So I thought it was really curious that you try to break in just by doing it yourself.
Yeah,
But,
I think.
anyway.
Yeah, it was never really. I mean, I won't lie. I did send submissions into people. I think I had a naive idea of what the industry was like. I really wanted to get in and do things like Will Eisner. Like wanted to make my own stories, write them, draw them, and the reality of the industry is that's very difficult to pull off. So I just decided that I would try to take a wide variety of gigs. I mean, I admired guys like Toth and these older guys that did all these different genres. They would do romantic comedies or straight romance comics or war comics, and then they might jump to a fantasy thing. And naively, I just thought that was a smart thing to do. So early on, if you look at my early books, they're all over the place. Like there's a Western comedy, there's a romantic comedy, there's honestly there were everything but superhero comics up until Deadpool. So my God, from '99 till last year maybe.
Wow.
So I thought that was the thing to do, which was probably unwise. The other thing I made a conscious decision to do was once I started to get job offers, I decided I would do one book for money and one creator-owned book, which meant I made a lot less money than I probably would have if I would have just done work-for-hire stuff. So for every work-for-hire book that you see with my name on it, there's a corresponding creator-owned project. So like, so like. Even right now, while working on Deadpool, I have a creator-owned book with a French publisher named Glénat that I'm working on the side. Last year I was doing Conan and doing an online comic strip about my kid. While I was at Vertigo, I was doing, The Unmen, and then eventually I think I was doing G.I. Joe, but I was also writing and drawing a creator-owned book with them. It never came out, but my point is for every one I was doing for a paycheck, I was doing one that I owned, using the money from the one to sort of fund the other,
Yeah,
Right.
cool. Play both
Sort
sides.
of making your life miserable.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's very difficult. I don't advise it for anyone. You, like I said, you cut your money in half, right? So for the creator-owned books often either pay in advance or that's a pittance compared to your work-for-hire stuff. Or sometimes nothing at all in the case of like image books and stuff. So, like the Hysteria stuff I did for years and years, and I never made a dime from. I always lost money on all the Hysteria things. And often I would do like a short story with someone. One of the things that was funny was online there was a news story about Hysteria when I put all the old stuff online as a webcomic. And I mentioned how I had done a short for slave labor. They had this anthology called Love and Tights or something, and they ran a Hysteria comic. And Dan, the guy that obviously runs slave labor, didn't even remember it. He's like, I have no idea. I mean, he published the thing and he had never even heard of it. So that's sort of that's sort of the downside of doing these creator-owned books. I mean, I could have gone all in with just work for hire stuff, but it just felt, I don't know, it just didn't feel right for me. I think for some guys that works beautifully. For me, it just wasn't, it wasn't what I wanted to do, so I just, I bounced around quite a bit.
Well, there's just some guys that their whole entire life is just dreaming to draw Spider-Man or Wolverine or Superman, it's like, and that's fine, because you'll even see, like, writers and stuff like that, like, their whole thing is, like, I want to write a Batman comic, and it's like, but there's plenty of people in the industry, like yourself, that, it's like that's not their end goal. It's like that's a great mile marker. That's a great thing to achieve. But and honestly, as a comic creator, I don't think that's a realistic goal for most people. Like at any time, there's like 3 Superman comics being published usually. Like even it's like that's 3 artists. At the most. Or unless it's Dan Jurgen, then he's doing all of them.
Absolutely. I also found that whenever I tried really hard, like if I set a specific goal like that. You can do it, but I found that it was often more disappointing than I had anticipated. You mentioned Batman. Like a while back, Bob Schreck was editing the Batman comics, and I think I was still at Vertigo, and I knew Bob, and I knew him from when he had begun owning press, and I had worked with owning press for a long time, so. I thought, this might be cool. I might get to do a Batman comic, and Bob and I talked about it, and it just never really panned out. And to be honest, he didn't feel I was ready, and I respected his opinion enough to take that seriously. And so I made my work better based on the stuff he told me I would have to do to be able to draw a Batman comic, but it never came to pass. Where I always found that these dream books sort of found me. I never had to try. Like if I tried for it, it didn't seem to happen. But like Conan, I remember being a kid and reading those big, those beautifully illustrated magazines and thinking like I want to do this, but never really tried to get a Conan book. It just sort of fell in my lap. Same with Superman. Like I haven't been able to do as much for them as I would like because of my obligations with Deadpool and my French books. But that happened totally on a fluke. They asked if I would draw some Action Comic stuff, and I was like, Jesus, how many times do you get asked to draw Superman?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think like once I chilled out and just let my career sort of do what it's gonna do, I started to have more fun, as opposed to deciding I want to be this guy that draws this thing, Well,
I was going to ask that now that, it's definitely you found some mainstream success, but it seems that now there's more options for independent artists. There's a really growing young adult market for graphic novels.
Yeah, man.
And have you considered,
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
going back to that.
I have. I get really excited by possibilities, even if they're not terribly pragmatic or practical, and I love the fact that we have these other real world. I hate to say real world, so forgive me, but these bigger publishers that have graphic novel imprints, and the last several years I've flirted with the idea of trying to get a book with one of them. Unfortunately, you need a literary agent, and I've approached a couple who I respect and have gotten some really good responses from them. But you have to have a pretty specific project for them to take you on, and that's one of those things. I have the book I mentioned that I was going to do with Vertigo that I got the rights back to. I'd like to take that route with that book, and one of the agents I approached really liked it, but she'd like to see it lettered, and I don't have the time at the moment. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love. I experimented early on with webcomics, and I tended to jump on these things, like an excited little kid before they were ready, I think, and then had to jump out because the ship was sinking, so to speak, and couldn't jump back on after people have fixed the boats up and got the things floating. I mean, like I remember telling years ago, like to a web designer friend of mine, like saying, God, I wish there was like a band camp for comics, like a thing where I could like throw comics up online and just sell them for a penny or $5, whatever anybody wants to throw on there. Because I was buying all this music on Bandcamp, and then like fast forward to now, and what's the comic with? Oh man, it's like a detective thing with Brian Vaughan and and it's like Bandcamp, and I'm just like, Christ, I wish, I'd love to do all that stuff, So working at Marvel, DC, and Dark Horse, they're all wonderful, and they're all throwing their stuff online, and they're all trying different things. But for me, I think coming out of I studied fine art, not so much publishing and stuff. So for me, the possibilities of new things are exciting. Like I wanted to do some comics as performance art, like stuff where you have to actually physically read it in a group with people, maybe like posters that you post up in a city, and it says like the next page is on this block, and as a group you kind of walk around. Just another while I was in college, I wanted to do a comic on plates, and like I was at an art school where I was an assistant teacher in the sculpture and ceramics department. And I'm mixing glazes for all the students and doing all this stuff, and I'm thinking, wouldn't it be kick-ass to like use this old tradition that the Italians would do on plates, where you would do these beautiful glazed paintings on a plate and fire them, and they'd have these pretty pictures, but we could do it as a comic, and you have to and you read it during dinner, like you're passing around meals, you know what I mean? So for me, like, I mean, anything that's possible, I want to do it. The only reason I'm not doing it is because just constraints of time and money.
Yep.
Oh,
Mike Hawthorne is the flaming lips of comics.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
Because it actually gave me an idea, and
I'm aping your shit, man.
Please don't. You'll make me cry.
We'll come back here in a few minutes. Well, actually, we'll be back tomorrow.
Yes.
And,
Christ, I talked that long. I'm sorry.
You just talked for 24 hours.
And we'll be back tomorrow, and we'll talk more with Mike Hawthorne about stuff like crowdfunding and the future of comic books, because I think we still got a lot to talk about on that topic. So
yeah, y'all get comfortable.
Yeah. So until then.
All right. May the force
be with
that ass.
Boom. Drop some mic.
Drop both mics, Wagner and Hawthorne.
Ow! That hurt.